Hi, everybody. My name is Kate. I work with Glasers. I do all the event programming for the store. And today I'm going to be your host and kind of MC panel question asking person. We are recording today's session and we'll make that available on our YouTube channel, hopefully later in the week. And I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for joining us today. I will ask that if you could please all mute your microphones, except for you guys on the panel. We need to hear your voices. But if those of you who are attending, please mute your microphones. And if you have questions or things you want to talk about, please post those questions in the chat room. I will be taking a moment to review those questions and ask these lovely ladies and gentlemen your questions. So don't worry, you will have a voice today. There will be some questions that we may not have time to get to, so please understand. I know some of the questions you may have could be a super deep and lengthy answer that might have multiple answers to it. So we're gonna do our best to answer as many questions and talk about as much of the business impact for freelancers and creatives in this pandemic that we are going through right now. So with that said, I just want to talk a little bit about how Glasers is operating right now. Right now we are, let's see, here we go. We are here Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Offering curbside pickup for your online orders. So you can place an order online, you can swing by to pick that up Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or we can ship it to your home or studio, whichever you prefer. We do offer free shipping on orders over $50 with some restrictions on that, of course. And I would like to share that hopefully in the next few days, this week sometime, our rentals department is going to reopen. So if you've been missing renting gear, the rentals department will soon reopen, and that too will be curbside pickup as we start to kind of like open things up again as a city. So that's a little bit about Glasers. Today, we're here to talk about business for freelancers and photographers during the pandemic, during COVID-19. We've all encountered a disruption in our work, a disruption in our income. So we thought it would be great to pull together legal minds, financial minds, and people who work with ASMP to help provide you the opportunity to ask some experts some questions and for some advice. So I'm going to introduce the folks who are on our panel today. We're going to start with Nathan and Gabe, who are legal minds, and they're going to say a little bit about themselves.
Hi.
It's you, Nathan.
I'm Nathan Hoerschelmann, the one of the dynamic duo of Hoerschelmann Dietz, PLLC. We are staunch supporters of ASMP. I served as legal counsel for member legal issues for ASMP for the last 4 years. Gabe and I have an extensive background working with contracts, working with businesses, small business concerns, litigation, and then I've had a primary focus working with and for photographers and creatives. So I'm familiar with working with ASMP and particularly the Seattle chapter, and I'm always here to be of support. My quick little statement though is that, again, as much as Gabe and I love you as people, we are not working as your attorneys in this capacity. Any and all information we provide is just to be of kind of a guidance. And if we sound as though we're being evasive with any of our answers, it's only because a lot of people's questions may become really specific, and Gabe and I are more than happy to take any and all questions offline and to be here to be of help. And with that, I'll stop.
Gabe, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, hi everyone, Gabe Dietz here. As Nathan mentioned, we have a great passion for working with small business owners and photographers and creatives. We really look forward today to going over any questions and concerns that you have regarding business opportunities, what the current state of legal affairs is, as well as discussing the finances, which Luke will get into. I think that's a good segue for him.
And so Good segue indeed. So someone else we have online with us today is Luke Frye of Timber Tax Co., who just did a session with us a couple of weeks ago on filing for unemployment. So Luke, go ahead and tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. I am Luke Frye, a Washington CPA and co-founder of TimberTax.co. I've certainly worked with a lot of different photographers over the past years, especially regarding sales tax in Washington, because it is so peculiar, as well as some local B&O tax issues. So if you have any questions about that specific to your situation, similar to Nathan and Gabe, I'm happy to have a call offline. General advice, certainly happy to provide as much context as I can right now. But if it's something hyper specific to your situation, it's good that we can set up a call afterwards. And like Nathan and Gabe, I'm not your accountant right now, so any advice I'm giving you is just general.
And thank you for that, Luke. We also have from ASMP and also a professional photographer here in Seattle, Washington, Will Austin. So Will, could you maybe tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. I don't think I have a disclaimer to give. I'll just speak from my experience. But yeah, I'm been a longtime member of ASMP, a longtime commercial photographer in Seattle, and I also on the ASMP board. I'm the membership chair.
And we also have online with us Kate Baldwin, who's also a local Seattle photographer. And Will and her will be able to kind of help hopefully bounce some ideas and questions off if you have them, as they're the people who are creating images and have also been impacted by what's been going on. So Kate, could you just introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kate. I have been on the local and national boards of ASMP, but I no longer am. Been in the business for a long time, and like everyone else, I'm affected by this, and looking for good ways to move forward through these crazy times.
All right.
It's good to connect with y'all.
Okay, it's so great for all of you guys. I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for your time today. It's really, I think from my perspective, one of the things that I've seen that's been really awesome is when seeing the community come together and all of these different artist groups coming together and supporting each other. I think that's just been really a really great thing to see because it has been definitely a challenging time in our neck of the woods. And I mean, so many freelancers have been impacted by this nationwide, worldwide. So in that light, we're not different than anybody else, but we might have some unique situations and cases that some of those other folks don't have. So we would like to, if you guys who are watching have questions that are on your mind, please feel free to post those in the chat room and we'll go through and answer as many of them as we can. We have a couple of topics also that we thought we could talk about while we wait for those questions to roll in. Before everybody got online, we were starting to talk a little bit about the different phases of reopening. And so Gabe, it sounded like earlier you maybe had found a couple of interesting articles on when people can actually start being a photographer again, when it's safe for us to. There was a letter that came out from Governor Inslee that said as of May 15th, it sounded like photographers could start reopening their businesses, but there's a lot of guidelines around that. Do you have anything in particular that you want to talk about in regards to that?
Yeah, thanks. I think that it's very important and everyone should take a look at the recent governor's proclamation. As you mentioned, it's dated May 15th and it's proclamation 2025. It's really interesting that the governor has specifically issued a proclamation dealing with professional photography. So I think it's good that the legislature and the governor are keeping this group of people in mind moving forward as we start to release the shutdown. in my mind, it's more of a roadmap. If you take a look at Proclamation 2025, as well as the Phase 2 Professional Photography COVID requirements documents. And Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we have that on the ASMP website as a resource for everyone. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll drop that link into the resource hub on into the chat room now. So there's a lot of information that they've been gathering. The ASMP has been pulling together for resources for everyone in the Pacific Northwest.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so in my mind, it's more of a roadmap in terms of where we're going to go when we completely reopen. Really, at this point, in order to resume photography services, photographers have to be doing the services in a county that's classified as Phase 2. Unfortunately, most counties in Washington are still classified as Phase 1, including King and most of the counties that are on the west side of the Cascades. The list of counties that have been released, most of them are on the east side. It's Ferry, Lincoln, Stevens, Skamania, Columbia, Garfield, Whitman, and Pend Oreille. And then also Kittitas County is currently pending review. But with that said, I think that you know, this does give us an idea of what things are going to look like when we reopen in King County and other places throughout the state. There are a lot of comprehensive requirements, including sanitization of equipment. Social distancing is still required of 6 feet. You can't have people pose together, touching each other, for example. So I think that it shows you that it's going to be a slow reopening, but it's a good idea to start keeping these things in mind and read through the memo in detail so that you can figure out, okay, what am I going to need to do with my business and what am I going to need to comply with once our county does reach Phase 2.
I think the other thing that I would add to that is I think that it's really important for each and every business. I mean, businesses are asked to do this if they have a brick and mortar, but I think a photographer should have it as well. And that's what are your COVID procedures and what are your processes, and make sure that those are known to your clients or to the people that are going to be on the shoot, as well as prospective clients, that you can provide an outline of these are the safety measures in which that I'm going to be using, whether it be having specific waivers that are added for any model release or for anybody to be involved, whether it be insurance riders. But I think the more that a photographer can present to, one, their clients, and two, whoever's going to be involved with the shoot, if these are the steps in which we're going to go about keeping our set safe and how we're going to be practicing this, I think is very, I mean, it's beyond helpful. I mean, that shows a level of professionalism, it shows a level of care, and not saying that we always have our mind on liability, but we always have our mind on liability, and you want to make sure and limit your exposure as best as possible.
Well, but that also shows a level of care for your potential client. And if
Absolutely.
Your client sees that you've put together all of these things and this is what you're committed to, potentially that could help you get hired for something at some point too.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, it shows a level of professionalism, right? It shows a level that you're taking this seriously. Then companies are going to feel as though, like, boy, that is somebody that I can trust and I can turn to, because they already have they have a number of questions answered that I have questions for that I have not even thought of yet. And I think that shows you well.
So just an FYI, I just put a bunch of links into the chat room for the things that we were just talking about. So take a moment and scroll up and find and just click on those links and bookmark them so you can review those later and you have those as a resource. Let's see. Are there any resources available for waivers and insurance writers and things like that?
I think actually the ASMP website, the national website, was going to have some updates, because I think that there was another presentation that was put on last week or the week before with Thomas Madry, and I think that he was going to put up some proposed waivers and riders with any and all of this, right? And this is again, if anybody has any question as to whether Gabe and I are attorneys, here are some great ways to figure it out. One, I love the sound of my own voice, but two, we're always trying to find ways to kind of distance ourselves from any liability. So so this is my comment. For any insurance waiver or any update that you're providing, please whether it's Gabe and myself or somebody else, make sure that you talk to some other attorney, or make sure you talk to somebody to look over whatever your documents are. If you are going to just blankly use any form off the internet and rely on that, you're setting yourself up. Even if it's just a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation, please turn to somebody else and make sure that they're looking through those documents with and for you. So what I'm saying is I think ASMP is going to have some resources up on their national site. But two, even with that being said, I recommend reaching out to somebody and making sure that it is applicable for you, one, for your jurisdiction, and two, for your specific needs.
That's good advice. It at least gives you a starting point, but working with someone like Nathan and Gabe can finalize that to make sure it's set up for you and your needs.
We are doing those kinds of documents for other clients, and happy to do that with and for any and all of you.
All right. So I know that one person has a bunch of pretty deep, how do I start my business questions. So if we have time, we're going to try and get to those kinds of things towards the end. We really kind of want to focus on questions that are of the moment, about the pandemic, about how your business has been affected, questions that you have on maybe getting going again, or even if you wanted to, maybe you were thinking about shuttering your business, like things like that. So we kind of really want to be on topic to how the closing of the city and the state and the country for almost 2 months now has affected you. What questions do you have around that?
And to be honest, like actually, I wanted to actually ask Kate and Will what this has looked like for them, what they're doing in the meantime, and then what are their kind of objectives or plans for these next few months.
So that's to you, Kate Baldwin, or Will Austin, if you have any.
Well, I'd say go ahead, Kate. I'm updating the website right now as we're speaking.
Okay, that's a big question, Nathan, but I'm happy to share. And I also, just FYI, I put in both the local Seattle COVID link, I think someone else already had, but also I put in the national COVID link for ASMP National into the chat box. I couldn't find whether there were actual waivers that had yet been created, but I do believe it's in the plans, and that'll be the link to them, I think,
yeah,
when they are created.
Well, and you can continue to check the ASMP website, both the Pacific Northwest site or the national site, for any kind of updates like that. So. Yeah,
and I have to say, Will has done an amazing job collecting, and I think others on the current board, perhaps Dean and others, did an amazing job pulling together a lot of resources that are both national and local. So kudos to Will. You know, Nathan, as just a more direct answer to your question, I mean, yeah, we've all been affected, you know, and as a non-essential business, it's been challenging. I personally, my business is incorporated. So I applied for the EIDL help. I applied for the PPP. I eventually, after not getting it in the first round, I applied for unemployment, and so I got a couple of weeks of unemployment before then getting a PPP in the second round. So I've had a little bit of help, which makes so much difference. And I've been, you know, spending my time working on wrapping up a lot of past projects that I hadn't had time to do, and you know, putting together things to use in the future. And I've been doing some fine art, which I have not had time to do for years. So I've been staying incredibly busy, but doing all those little things that I normally don't have time to do.
Well, and I know for me, because I make part of my income from doing headshots and portraits, and I make part of my income from teaching workshops. And obviously I couldn't do either of those during this time. So for me, I launched a YouTube channel, and I started doing weekly free online photo classes on different topics. And it's just, for me, it's been another way to kind of continue to be in front of the community. And I love teaching. So it's just like, and it gives me something to focus on. Like Kate's talking about creating fine art, you know, it's just trying to do those things that you don't always have time to do because you're busy doing the other things. So is super helpful.
There's one of my favorite ASMP members who's been a client of ours for a long time is Shawn Hubbard. He's located out in Baltimore. I'm not getting paid to plug his work, but if you feel like checking out an incredible Instagram feed, I'd recommend Shawn's. And one of the beautiful things for him is that it's similar to what Kate just said, is that this has been a forced pause, which has then made him go back into his catalog and to go back into his archives. And he came away with a series of photos now from about 4 years ago, in which he went and covered some demonstrations after kind of a moment of injustice that had happened with the, and I cannot remember the specifics of what the event was, but in talking with him, he's taking this as like, hey, this has given me a moment of forcing me to kind of rearrange some of my past work, to really look at what has worked and what has not, and to how do I want to really reframe what I'm doing going forward. I would say that last little comment, and then I swear I'll be quiet. If you have an opportunity to look at like YouTube Conan O'Brien's 2011 Dartmouth commencement speech, right? And if you like Conan, then the whole 24 minutes is great. If you don't, then you can skim to the 18-minute mark, and that's where he really gets going. But in essence, he just says that, hey, failure is inevitable. But failure, if handled correctly, allows for an opportunity of clarity, conviction, and reinvention. And I certainly have taken that to heart, both in personal and professional moments. And I give that same recommendation. I have sent that YouTube link to, I cannot even count how many clients or friends during these last few months. And that has worked as therapeutic, but then also as kind of, how do I want to go about this, and what are some great things that I can do at this moment? Now I'll be quiet.
Will, did you have any input on the topic of kind of what you're doing now to keep yourself busy? How has this impacted, your freelance work? Are you in a space to share right now?
Yeah. It's interesting, when it started, because it's kind of hard to remember when it started, but I remember my second to last shoot was downtown, and we went to lunch at Aponessa, and it was a little bit sketchy, like, should we be eating in a restaurant, and it was before social distancing and stuff, but we knew to be careful and wash our hands. And so that was my last restaurant meal. And then the next week I had a really small interior architecture shoot, and there were some people there. So I sanitized everything, and I wore gloves and a mask, and I re-sanitized. I didn't touch anything in the house except for light switches. I sprayed all them off, and then right before I left, and then I went to my car and I sprayed down my tripod and sanitized all my gear, as much as I could in the back of my car. So anyway, that was before the lockdown even. So I was being extra careful just in case. And then after that, I didn't have any jobs. It was done. That was the third week in March. And so basically that week I worked like 2 hours. And then, so I don't know. I guess for me, after that, it was just a scramble to try to get some of the PPP or the SBA money. I didn't apply for the SBA emergency loan. I applied for the PPP, and it didn't get it. And my banker at BECU was amazing. He was emailing me Friday night late, on the weekends, Sunday night even. He was working day and night all week, 7 days a week, to try to get his clients the PPP. And he got, I didn't get, it's just me, so it wasn't very much, but I did finally get it after like 5 or 6 tries. So that once I got that, it was a huge relief. And so yeah, I've been catching up on stuff, mostly staying at home. My wife has asthma, so I've been the only one to leave and go shopping. And I, follow all the procedures to clean everything off as best I can. So we're being very careful. So anyway, it's been a nice break for me. I mean, my taxes were done on time this year. My yard looks better than it's ever looked. I have caught up on some photography stuff. I mean, I've gone through old files and organized my hard drives and done massive backing up and so forth. And the interesting thing is, I'd say now, is that I'm getting, just today even, I've gotten a deluge of inquiries for shoots, people wanting to get going again. And I'm a little bit torn because I'm a little bit worried about going to some places. I mostly shoot architecture, you know. One job I have, there's no one there. It's a new home, no one's there. So that's not a big deal, I don't think. But also, I think, you know, from looking at the rules from the state of Washington, I'm supposed to wait till King County's in phase 2, and I don't know when that's going to be. And I don't think anyone really knows. They say maybe beginning of June, but my clients are like chomping at the bit. So it's a good feeling to have that coming, that work. But at the same time, it's kind of caught me off guard because I thought this was going to last a little longer before people really got going again. I went to the grocery store the other day and it was packed, like just like the old days. The parking lot was packed again. You know, the parking lots were empty for so long. And I will note also that I did update our COVID hub on the ASMP Seattle website, and I put the 2 documents from the state, the 2 PDFs about pertaining to photography, photographers, and shooting again. And also I put a 3rd link on there. It's called Safety While Shooting, the ASMP guide. And like Nathan said, ASMP did do a really great webinar, and there are waivers and other documents, sample documents, if you want to check them out. And they're not just for members, they're for anybody. So that link is on the ASMP Seattle COVID-19 support hub. And as far as what I've done for the futures, I've already written. I took some of this stuff that ASMP put up, and I've written my own document that I send to my clients, and I'll send to the homeowners or whoever I work with in terms of the steps I'm going to take to try to be safe while I shoot, to protect myself and them. And it roughly follows what the state says to do as well. But when ASMP did the seminar on Friday, they made it very clear that and Luke mentioned this before too in another seminar, the 4 agreements, but anyway, about doing your best. You know, if you're probably not going to be found negligent if you made your best effort to do the right thing. And I'm making it clear by putting it in writing and send it to everyone that I work with, what my steps, the steps I'm going to take to make the best effort possible to work safely as we go forward. And so I haven't gone to the point where I'm going to have everyone sign waivers and say, don't sue me if if something happens, but I did take that step that, to make it very clear that I'm being as safe as possible.
Yeah, and it looks like someone has shared their website where they made a landing page on their website to talk about the steps that they're taking. And that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. When people are looking for photographers, they're looking at your website, and having that kind of information readily available if they're a potential new client would be totally beneficial. So
can I jump in about like just an opportunity to kind of revisit your agreements? And I say this only in that a lot of times we'll have clients that'll come to us and say, hey, we have a dispute, or we have something going on, or we had another ASMP client or ASMP member that's a client who had a big shoot for a big international car company. And that shoot got canceled, and we had to then turn to the agreement and look at force majeure provisions and look at cancellation provisions. And what I'm going to turn this to Gabe here in just a second. So Gabe, there's your forewarning. But I say that in that a lot of times photographers will just accept whatever verbiage is in an agreement without really understanding what they mean. And I say this all the time, agreements are really critical, not when things are going well, but when things go sideways. And that's when people will turn to agreements and turn to what are cancellation provisions, what are termination provisions, what are dispute resolution provisions, like what do we do if something goes wrong? And one of the ones that is really important, and well, Gabe, do you mind explaining the force majeure and how that plays into this?
Yeah, of course. Touching on what Nathan and Will said, let me just preface that with the fact that I think now everybody needs to take a really pragmatic approach, especially towards how they're approaching disputes. One thing at issue is that courts are basically closed. You can still file a case, filings are still allowed, but process servers are going to be much slower. So you might not even be able to get to serve a party. And at this point, a lot of motions are just on hold. So it's hard to actually push a case forward at this time. I think it's best that parties look at their agreement, they try to work practically with one another. And as Will mentioned, I think in times like these, doing the right thing goes a long way. We've negotiated on behalf of a lot of parties, keeping them out of a dispute, trying to help everyone reach what is a reasonable conclusion based on the fact that, you know, a lot of people didn't really see this coming. I think it's important to mitigate your damages. You need to do everything that you can to try to minimize your own costs. You need to create a paper trail. You need to communicate with other parties, including insurers. If you have a landlord, it's important to talk to your landlord early. You'll want to talk to any creditors, any government agencies as well. And from what I've seen in general, and I think Nathan would agree with me, that a lot of people are working together to try to resolve these types of things on good terms. With that said, yeah, one of the things we need to talk about is force majeure. Force majeure, it's a contractual principle, so you need to look at your agreement to see if your agreement has a force majeure clause in it. And you need to read it carefully. You need to see if it applies to things like pandemics, government shutdowns. The reason why that matters is because the question is whether or not this pandemic was reasonably foreseeable to the parties. And basically the force majeure clause is aimed at generally allowing a delay in the agreement. For example, the classic thing that when I think of when I think of a force majeure clause is weather delays on a construction project. That's a great example. If there's severe snowstorms, for example, and the project is delayed, the force majeure clause will come into play and give the contractor extra time to perform. Some force majeure clause apply. Some force majeure clauses apply to payment issues, but generally I would say that it has to be specifically listed in the force majeure clause in order for that to apply. Another thing that's important to keep in mind about force majeure is that it doesn't apply to general economic hardship. Typically, the ability for the person to pay the agreement has to be very extreme in order for the clause to be applicable and for the agreement to be canceled in that way. So that's kind of a general overview of force majeure. I can answer any other specific questions that people have. The other thing that I would argue, that I would mention is that also we need to think about the other common law doctrines of impracticability and impossibility. These kind of come up if you don't have a force majeure provision in your agreement. And basically those say that, let's say your contract is impossible or extremely impracticable to perform. Well, then you're probably excused from performing the agreement. It has yet to be seen, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good case law on this because we've just never really dealt with a situation like this before. So it's hard to say how a court would interpret that, but I think that it's important to know that there is some type of argument out there that a party could get out of the agreement if they needed to. Although most of the attorneys that I've talked to and the consensus at this point is that impracticability and impossibility probably aren't applicable in general to the COVID-19 situation, just because financial difficulties have to be extreme. They have to be very large in order to excuse performance.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Because I have one for Luke. I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit because I'm curious if Luke, could you talk a little bit about the financial resources available currently for freelancers who've lost income and work? I know that Kate touched on them a little bit, but it might be good to hear from you on those financial options while we wait for any potential questions to come in about what Gabe and Nathan were talking about.
Absolutely. I think that there has been so many things available and changing, and we're sort of at this period, at least, where most of us kind of have some familiarity with the idea of the PPP or the EIDL loan. So I can talk a bit about those. And Kate, is the unemployment webinar posted somewhere on
Yes,
YouTube already?
It's
It
on
is.
YouTube. I will share a link to that. I'll find it.
Okay. So the two most important things that if you don't know you shouldn't have that I would recommend following up on are the EIDL loan, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or the Paycheck Protection Program. Both of these are administered by the Small Business Administration. So if you don't know what the Small Business Administration is, it's a really wonderful organization that helps newer businesses. It's a bit tough ordinarily to get loans from them sometimes, even though their intent is to help new businesses. Sometimes you have to prove that you can't get cash elsewhere. Well, a lot of what happened in this time is the SBA act as a savior of sorts. And with that, the EIDL loan offered a $1,000 grant per employee if you applied for it. And then they were quite behind because this EIDL loan, so truly a loan, something you have to pay back, that was kind of put on the back burner for a while. And then once the Paycheck Protection Program was mostly funded, I've heard that quite a few people have then subsequently got their EIDL loan because the shift went from, okay, we have a problem where a lot of people are going to be registering on unemployment. How do we keep as many people off of unemployment as possible? And that's really what the purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program is. And so if you haven't applied and you had a net income last year, I very highly encourage you to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program today. I helped somebody on Friday afternoon get apply, and then I believe they got their approval within the next day, and then funding. So I'll talk a bit more specifically about the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And they just recently released the forgiveness application, which we can link later, but it's got a lot of clarity on what exactly will be forgiven and how. The nice thing is that for sole proprietors, so people, whether you have an LLC or not, if you have a Schedule C, so you're reporting on your 1040 personal tax return, that's actually going to be the simplest way for you to not only apply, but also get the loan forgiven. So the stages of the PPP loan are, okay, we're applying, then you get funded, actually money deposited in your account, and then you apply to have a portion of it forgiven. And then the remainder turns into an actual loan. Now that means that if you didn't use the funds correctly, or if you didn't apply correctly, because there was such a mad dash to get money out there. In fact, I had a client email me yesterday that their lender accidentally sent them an extra $20,000 because, I don't know, I'm assuming it's just an administrative error of trying to move too quickly, you know, and balancing out how quick we get information with how accurate it is always a bit tough. So we've helped people get close to $1 million worth of PPP money. And that means that now we need to work with them as closely as possible to make sure that as much of it is forgiven as possible. I think some things that will always remain timeless advice and seem especially so in a pandemic are things like, you know, have some sort of an advisor. If it's not a lawyer or an accountant, maybe some sort of a business coach. You know, make sure you're taking advantage of these resources through Glasers or ASMP. You know, similar to washing your hands, make sure that you have your records in order. Make sure you have these good accounting hygiene habits, which is have a bookkeeper, have a CPA that you can ask advice to, get your books done every month. And then the nice thing is when you're in this situation, you're just going to be ready with the documents that you need. Part of the catch-22 on the payroll protection program is wonderful. The tax deadline has been extended to July 15th. Everybody says, great, I didn't want to worry about it anyway. Well, then the Paycheck Protection Program loan says, we need your Schedule C. So even though the deadline is extended, we still have to get this done. So, I think it is an interesting time to refilter what is a priority to you. I've certainly seen some of our clients who are travel bloggers or travel photographers switch to more at-home type stuff, and just kind of sharing where you are as far as their blogging content. So that might be something that if you haven't already, you could certainly consider. But I think the most important thing is really, if you haven't applied for a PPP and you don't know that you shouldn't have, to go ahead and apply, because there is more money. And for sole proprietors, it is going to be about as simple as possible. The formula is 2.5 months of your last year's net income that you would receive in cash. And then as far as we know, you're just automatically forgiven 8 50-seconds of that. So essentially, you get about 2 months worth of your 2019 net income for free.
Well, thanks for all that information, Luke. I'm posting links in the chat room so that people can click on those and read more and make some decisions regarding all of that. Gabe, did you have any input on that?
Yeah, as Luke mentioned, I think it's important to reach out to lenders early. It's important to work with your banker. And also going forward, it's difficult to predict how audits will go and be conducted in terms of all these loans. It's been a very fast rollout of all of the loans that have been issued. And unfortunately, it's been somewhat disorganized just because of the speed at which they're trying to do it and the sheer volume of the amount of money that they're trying to pump into the economy so quickly. So I think that that's to be expected. I do think that it's really prudent to fix any errors in applications and make sure that applicants correct any problems that were in their applications in the past. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where you applied with some information and it turned out to be wrong, or you're applying through the wrong program. So definitely keep bird dogging these issues and following up with your CPA and your banker, making sure that you're not making any false statements or statements that need to be corrected later.
Hey, Kate.
Yeah.
I have a question for Luke. Segueing off, might be helpful for people. So on the PPP, it's supposed to go towards payroll and rents and a couple other things. Mostly mine is payroll and rents, but anyway. So on the payroll portion, I was confused because I think it doesn't cover the federal withholding and the Social Security, Medicare, or is it just, so in terms of the percentage it covers for payroll, is it just the net paycheck to the employee? I'm not really sure what counts on the payroll is what I'm saying.
Right. So that is a question specifically related to what counts as payroll costs. And the big rule that Will's talking about for everyone is that 75% of the proceeds must be used for payroll. And so if you are self-employed, so you have a Schedule C, sole proprietor, single member LLC who's not an S corporation, this advice doesn't apply to you. The taxes that Will's talking about are the FICA taxes and what would be included in that calculation, and income tax. So my understanding is that the employer's share of the tax is not included, but the employee's share is, meaning income tax and the FICA taxes there. Okay. Now, I'll switch to the Schedule C people. So I'm talking to you if you are sole proprietor, single member LLC who's not an S Corp. Anytime, if you got stuck applying for this, anytime you were asked for payroll forms, you would just apply your Schedule C. So your Schedule C is driving that entire approval and forgiveness from 2019. So it's interesting because, you know, it was a bit of a celebration. Wonderful, everybody got all this money. If you made 100 grand last year or more, you capped out at 20,800. You know, get the champagne and, you know, continue on. But the problem is that it's not totally free money. There's always some sort of strings attached. One of them is that you can't deduct anything that you use the money for. So all of a sudden this is taxable. So you're slowly whittling away at the benefit. Overall, it's, I think, in that positive, a really good move, something that was very helpful. There's a really interesting area for sole proprietors, single member LLCs who are not S corporations, because your pay, your owner draw, is not an expense anyway. So many people are feeling a bit frustrated that, oh, now I don't get to make these deductions, you know, and then trying to figure out the exact number. And the good news for sole proprietors or Schedule C people is, you know, your pay is not deductible anyway. My general advice is still to transfer, you know, half of what you received in the first 4 weeks, and then the other half in the second 4 weeks from your business account to your personal account to show your pay. I don't think you're going to have to actually show that. I think it's going to be just your 2019 Schedule C. But because there is so much uncertainty until we actually go through this process, you know, this is about as new to me, this forgiveness application, as it is to anybody else here. And I haven't gotten any loans forgiven because it hasn't happened yet. So my advice until then is just to do your best as far as documenting and you know, acting in good faith. So be sure that money is partitioned. Be sure at least 75% of it is for payroll or owner draw if you're sole prop. And then the other 25%, you know, it becomes a little bit of a negotiating exercise with understanding the rules and law. I know that I answered your question and I added to it. Was there anything else that came up, Will, regarding that?
Yeah, I'm an S corp, and so it's one of those weird things where I own the company I work for, and
yeah,
so I there's the employee portion of the check and the business company, and I just pay it all, you know.
Yeah, and so that application should help guide some of it, and then also with your lender, and they should help with a lot of that. You also are going to need to contemplate, you know, what your payroll was last year versus seasonal, and then the payroll period is a little bit funky. You know, we work with a lot of S corporations, and the IRS says you have to pay yourself a reasonable salary, which sometimes means you just pay yourself once a year. All of a sudden, it becomes really important to have documentation throughout the year of your payroll, you know, even by week in this situation. So it's interesting how we might optimize situations depending on different sets of rules, and obviously these rules we didn't know about until recently. So
I got a cool spreadsheet from a, oh gosh, I can't remember where I got it. Maybe an accounting website or something, and it's to track your PPP. It's just a simple spreadsheet. The amount you started with and the date, and it subtracts off, you know, if you use it for payroll, how much was it, and it subtracts that amount. It's just a simple spreadsheet. So at least I'll have something to keep track of it.
Is that something that you can share a link to for everybody else?
See if I can find it.
Yeah, we've worked with some clients on that. If you're an Excel person, it's essentially just starting with your total funding amount and that date, and then every time you spend it, you know, try to keep that amount you spend to be 75% payroll. That was another question I had last week, that I attended a webinar from a regional Pacific Northwest director, and I asked about, you know, are we concerned with 75% of the original loan being used for payroll, or 70, because some people got overfunded? And his response was, as long as 75% of what you use it for is payroll, meaning maybe you kept that other portion that you weren't sure about whether you were really entitled to or not because the rules were unclear or the application was a bit funky. You know, certainly communicate with the bank, but try to keep at least the actual use of the money to be 75% payroll, and then you should be okay.
Cool.
So many things to keep in mind.
Mhm.
So we have about 10 minutes left. Does anyone have any questions on the topic about the loans, unemployment, any of the other legal conversation that we've had so far? Kate Baldwin just posted the link to the PPP forgiveness tracking sheet that Will was just talking about. So just seeing, I know a couple of you guys have like a lot of deep business questions, and maybe down the line we can do another follow-up webinar to talk about like kicking off your business. But for now, we do still want to be focused on the impact of the COVID on your business and stuff like that. So does anybody have any other questions? I think one thing that's been on my mind a little bit, and I'll be honest, I've been kind of taking a break from a lot of the news, so I'm a little bit behind because I kind of reached a point where I was overwhelmed with all of the different stories and all of the different theories about this, that, and the other thing. So Luke, Gabe, Nathan, do you guys have any insight on, there were supposedly going to be maybe more stimulus packages coming down the line, as the one that we're currently using has an end date, I believe, in mid-July or sometime in July. So do you have any insight on a next phase stimulus package? Has anything passed, or is it still kind of in conversation and being voted on?
Just really quickly, I'm losing pints of blood by biting my tongue at the moment.
Okay. Because you're not watching the news?
No, no, I mean, if we're going to, I'm just going to stay away from like the political climate and the organization and how this has all been rolling out, because it's a disaster on top of a disaster. Sorry, Luke, were you about to say something that has more meaning than that?
There is a bill that was being voted on the House on Friday, I believe. It's called the HEROES Act. So the one that established the PPP and then the refunding of the PPP because it ran out. Something else I should mention, EIDL is gone now. If you didn't apply for EIDL, you can't unless you're in ag. So the CARES Act is what had originally funded this, and then now there's a HEROES Act. And I didn't see whether it actually passed or not, but I just pulled up a recent news article, and it says in the bill, the intent was to add an additional stimulus amount, so like another check, more canceling of different stuff. So obviously, when there's so many different provisions before it's actually law, it's hard to say what would stay, but it does look like the federal Congress is trying to do something else in addition to what has already been passed.
Because, like you guys said earlier, we are, different parts of the state have entered phase 2 of trying to reopen and getting their businesses going again. But Seattle is still not in that phase. And honestly, my opinion is, since we're one of the biggest cities, we're probably going to be one of the last ones to get into phase 2. And we talked a little bit about that before we kicked this off today. So, I think most of us are just taking things day to day and doing the best we can to kind of keep our heads above water. Because it's also like a emotional impact to the fact that we can't explore and have the lives that we had before. And, being able to go to the park and just wander, and maybe there's 100 people there and you don't have to worry about it. But now if there's 100 people there, you do have to worry about it. So there's a deeper impact than just our businesses. It's obviously greatly impacted our day-to-day lives.
And I would say, that I think that certainly on a personal level, it's personal level and on a professional level, like this event has had similar impacts, at least for me, as it is when I do international travel, right? Or at least for me, whenever I've gone on a trip, there's a level of, I really enjoy the X, Y, or Z about this culture, but I really miss ABC, right? And so there's been, and I'm not trying to boost Conan O'Brien again, but I get back to this, like, what is it about, like in this moment right now, like I really am enjoying very focused, very deliberate, very present time with my kids. I'm also really enjoying being able to really delve deeply into some of my clients' needs in terms of revamping their business, revamping their documents, their structure. And again, this forced pause, again, if it's used correctly, and if you're able to do it, like I love that Kate's comment about being able to do some personal work and do some fine artwork. And I've had a number of other clients that fine, this isn't the way that I would have liked to have gone about it, but this is forcing me to now invest in myself or look at the things that I really matter, that I really enjoy on a daily basis, or what I enjoy working on. And then how do I really steer back to that? Or what are some things that I don't miss? And what are some things about this business that I don't miss? And then trying to kind of make those calibrations and making those changes as well. So I think it is disruptive. It is alarming. It is emotionally draining, but it's not without opportunities. And again, if you need somebody else to talk to, whether it be Luke or whether it be other people within ASMP, I mean, that's part of the reason why you join an association, is that you can lean on one another, turn to one another, have another resource, have another shared experience, or somebody else that can understand what you're going through and be able to relate to you. I mean, that's the point, right? That's the point of being a part of this kind of group. And that's the point of these kinds of opportunities. And I think that it's really an opportunity for people to really double down on some of those connections that maybe they hadn't before. So I've certainly done that on personal and professional levels, and I highly recommend taking those opportunities too.
I'll agree with you there. I definitely, we're doing these virtual Zooms right now, but also doing these with other creatives in the market are things that I'm trying to do on a regular basis, just to, I'm used to getting together with those people and having coffee and discussing what's going on, or ideas or concepts, and, oh man, this totally failed, whatever the case may be. And now those have shifted to Zoom or Google Meet or whatever. It's still not quite the same. I miss going to my local coffee shop and writing for a couple of hours. So sure. I look forward to that day again for sure.
But in the meantime, it is what it is, right? And so there are still opportunities that are here, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard making that mental shift, making that paradigm shift. But when I've done it, my day is more successful. My week is more successful. I mean, Gabe and I half joke that justice does not wait for a virus or does not wait for a pandemic to end. I mean, there still is work to be done. There still are opportunities, and we work hard to do that. So I'm hoping everybody's able to do the same.
That's really good advice. So we're wrapping up our time here. I'd like to see if Gabe, Luke, Will, Kate have any closing comments, and then I'm going to share some links back into the room because I want to thank everyone for their time today. So I want you to have access to all of the great minds that have joined us today. So I'm going to share the link for ASMP, for Nathan and Gabe's website, and for Luke's website as well. So gentlemen and Kate, if you have any closing comments, I'd love for you guys to maybe chime in with them.
Make a comment.
Yes, just a comment.
I'd just like to say, for us to grow and thrive in our industry and as freelancers, it's just really important to support our local institutions. And we really appreciate Glazers being a sponsor of ASMP Seattle. And everybody shop local, shop at Glazers, support Glazers. If we didn't have Glazers, what would we do? And same with Nathan and Gabe and Luke. They're right here in our city, and they've created their businesses to support creatives like us. So we really appreciate them. And this is a time, I've been an ASMP member for a long time. It's really helped my career in many ways. But this is a time when I've really seen ASMP kick in and work overtime to continue doing the programs they do to lobby and advocate for photographers, but also jump in on this pandemic and bring us a weekly webinar and with experts to kind of help get us through this difficult time. And I appreciate ASMP more than ever. So that's my plug for ASMP. Membership has gone down a little bit over the last 10 years or so for many professional organizations, but I think this is a time that shows that it's really important to support those types of things.
Well, and we definitely appreciate the time, and it's always great to collaborate with you guys on different events and be able to provide resources for the community for sure. So
We appreciate it. Thanks.
Will, I'm so glad you said that. I was about to say something similar, but I think you articulated it a little better. I'm so impressed with the way people like the national organization of ASMP, local ASMP people associated with it, like attorneys, Glazers, everybody. I'm just so impressed with the way people have stepped up to support the community and support one another. And I think we can continue to do that. I think this is an opportunity for all of us to come together, you know, and support one another. And I know that I'd be very happy to speak with anybody one-on-one who, you know, needs some sort of photo business support, if there's anything that I could ever do. So thanks for organizing this, Kate.
oh yeah, you got it. I again just thank you everybody for tuning in. Everybody's email addresses just about have been dropped in the chat room, as well links to their websites. So if you want to connect with any of these folks individually, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you have ideas for future events like this, things that you'd like to see the store host, or if you have any questions for me directly, you can also send me an email. I've been a big part of this community since I've been here in 2007. And I miss going on photo walks and having those conversations and just seeing everybody's faces and just, you know, chatting about photography and ideas and concepts. So looking forward to those days when we get to do that again soon. As we wrap this up, I just want to kind of revisit, Glasers is here for you. We are open for business. You can place your orders online and do curbside pickup Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or we can ship the orders directly to you. And coming soon, our rental shop will be reopening, also available for curbside pickup. So, and drop off. Yes, you don't get to keep it. Unfortunately, you will have to return it. But thank you again, Nathan, Gabe, Luke, Kate, Will. Your time is valuable, and we are truly, truly grateful for you spending a little bit of time with us today. For those of you who tuned in, this session has been recorded, and we'll post it on YouTube hopefully by the end of the week. So thanks again, everybody. Take care, create, think about what's next for your business, and have a great day.